I'd say it's a big weekend for Penn State football recruiting, but I'd be repeating myself. Both those statements are true. The fact that Penn State has many of their top prospects at multiple positions coming to campus this weekend. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Breaking down the players visiting, their importance, and what these guys generally think of the recruiting process for top players like Luke Wafel, Carter Meadows, Damari Simeon, Grayson McHugh, all that on the show today. And of course, if you're looking at this and going, it's 9 o'clock, what in the world are you doing, T. Frank? Well, in case you missed it, we mentioned in the last couple shows, James Franklin is speaking at noon today. So in order for me to not have my proverbial and theoretical hair on fire between the end of the show and getting over there to make sure I record James Franklin and get it to you so you can complain about the audio, we needed a little more time. I just needed a little more time. And so we're going at 9 a.m. Great idea by Fitz, by the way, to go a little bit earlier. So Fitz, thanks for the suggestion. Welcome to the show.
Great idea by me, who showed up 2 minutes late. I apologize for that.
I was going to say, are you regretting the decision?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you I was out doing important journalism or getting a scoop or something like that. But I was on a dog walk and I saw a snapping turtle, and I'm, like my 11-year-old, love turtles. So so that's where I was. That's why I'm late, but I'm glad that we are early so we can talk to James Franklin and the assistants today. Always a fruitful experience. It's going to sustain us through June, basically from the football side of things. But until then, really looking forward to talking to those guys, seeing what the vibe is in terms of it's a pretty good football team, and I think they know it. So excited to talk to those guys.
My process the last couple of weeks, I have no problem telling you all here on the show, is I would go to the official website, stare at the roster, stare at the names, and then hope an idea formed in my head of what to talk about. Now we'll have some quotes, we'll have some thoughts. I can ask all of my questions that I've been asking these guys and presenting my theories, do our best to get you that information. And as Fitz said, an update that's going to be fruitful for the rest of the month, providing more insight for you at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Ryan Snyder doing that continuously on the recruiting side of things. Ryan, how you holding up? We're right in the thick of it in the foxhole. How you doing?
Good, man. We got 15 or so this weekend, still kind of chipping away at who's coming, if there's any late additions, all that. But should be the busiest weekend so far as uncommitted guys, without a doubt. And then when you look at the top of the top guys that are coming, man, there's a bunch of top 100 players here this weekend. So really important weekend. I think defensive line, we'll get into that. If you look at just kind of who's all coming, this is a big weekend for Deion Barnes. Big weekend for Troutwine too, especially after getting a commitment the other day, 3 publicly. As we said, we feel pretty good about Marlon Bright, so it's kind of 3.5, 4, pencil them in if that's how you want to look at it. And then you have Grayson McHugh and JB Shabazz and some other guys coming to town. So very, very interesting weekend for defensive line especially, but offensive line as well.
I want to start with something in the chat here. So Alan Saunders posts this here. He says, good thing Penn State already has a lot of commits. You can no longer wait for June visiting season to start getting your class. That doesn't work anymore. I think that there's some truth here in terms of, kind of the spirit of the point. But Penn State's been working ahead for many years now, right, Ryan? In terms of building their class, they want to establish a strong foundation, maybe even a year before. I guess, what is Alan picking up on here in terms of what's happening this year, maybe differently than previous years, if there is anything?
Penn State has the third most commitments right now of any Power 4 school with 18. I think Rutgers is at 19. They just got a couple in the last couple of days. USC is far away from everybody else with 27. Looks like they found a treasure chest or something like that. Well, who knows? But it's not. I don't remember exactly where Penn State was at this stage last year, but they were still, above a dozen, I believe. They had quite a few at this point, and they've been in that cycle for a while now. I think a lot of people are seeing some of the commits they've taken recently, and they're like, well, why are you taking, a 3-star like Benazuka when, you got Carter Meadows, or excuse me, Carter Scruggs out there and all these other offensive linemen. It's what's the best way to put it? One, I think it's the finances. People have to remember there's a salary cap now, right? You got to find guys that aren't going to break the bank. And then when you look at what's left, right? A lot of top guys are still available who Penn State is going to have to get into a bidding war with to win those guys over. It just is what it is, or likely will have to. They know they won't get all of them, but they also know that they need to set a foundation and then have a substantial amount of money left over here to get some of these big top prospects down the stretch. So it's always interesting. I think fans are like, well, why are you taking these guys now? Let's see what happens with these other players and then make that move. But what happens if when you pass on players who want to commit, it's a massive turnoff to them and their families. So you don't really want to do that and then try to circle back in August. Sure. Like a Cam Smith, for example, that worked out last year, but more often than not, trying to circle back on plan B is not the right way, but guys who maybe aren't those top guys, it usually doesn't work out. So then you're dipping down your board even more and so on and so forth. So I think Penn State, I know James Franklin knows what he's doing with that.
Feels like there's you got to time all this right on top of the fact that you got to build all the relationships and you've got to talk about the money at the right. This is all just a delicate balancing act. It feels like it almost feels like the American Ninja Warriors course that you're trying to get through when it comes to recruiting. Let's get into one of those players we're talking about here when it comes to top player. Maybe finances are involved given the teams that are involved. And well, definitely that is. And of course, that's going to start our Penn State recruiting news update. Quick thing to get here before we get into, the breakdown of the weekend, everything we previewed at the top of the show. So Fitz, you want to jump in here and tell us a little bit more about what's going on with Joey O'Brien? You're muted, by the way. Fitz, you're muted.
Still muted.
I wasn't even on this screen. I was doing some other stuff in the Lions Den, trying to get some posts. But no, sorry about that. Top 4 for Joey O'Brien. He's going to announce on June 30th. He told Hayes Fawcett of On3 last night that he's down to 4 schools: Oregon, Clemson, Penn State, Notre Dame, which means the Tennessee visit is off. Tennessee is out. The Notre Dame visit is up to June 13th, and he's going to make a decision on June 20th. This is when he went to Clemson over the weekend. He still has the Notre Dame and the Oregon official visits scheduled for the next couple of weeks. So he's going to be very busy until that date. I said it before, Penn State getting the first visit. I'm not sure that was the best strategy for the Nittany Lions to lock that one down. But I think there's still an opportunity there. This is a kid that's bounced from school to school, favorite to favorite. And, I think that's been well documented here that he likes everything that he's seen, and he should like everything that he's seen because everything is great right now in recruiting. So once they break it down, take that Notre Dame visit on the 13th, come home and sort of reshuffle some things and make a decision. I think that's when, you're really going to see, more solid intel. I think Clemson really impressed him this weekend, as we all knew they would. And I think wherever, I think it's, Oregon this weekend, they'll impress him as well. So he's going to have a lot to think about. Is a week enough time to weigh the pros and cons, to do all that kind of stuff and come up with a decision on the 20th? I'm not necessarily sure that's true. But he's going to have a lot to think about. So it's Penn State still firmly in this mix. Again, don't care for the early official visit for a recruitment like this, but that's the hand they kind of dealt themselves. So we will see what happens. Penn State's still firmly in the mix, though. I think it's going to be easy to sort of write them off because of the way that this one has gone. But I think that he will sort of reshuffle that deck after the Notre Dame visit and see what's up. Again, cannot stress enough that they're still firmly in this mix. Yeah.
So to play off of that and what you guys have talked about and what Fitz just outlined in terms of Joey O'Brien, like feeling the love in each visit that he goes to, is the lack of a second unofficial follow-up visit, which you guys have said if they are lucky they could get him back at the end of June. It seems like that's not going to happen at this point. Ryan, is that a positive and negative? I guess, how do you view the timeline in the news here of what Fitz just outlined and what he just said?
Let's see. I'm not exactly sure. What happens if he comes up in between Notre Dame or Oregon and Notre Dame? We don't exactly know. So it's just kind of hard to answer that right now. What I would say is I always kind of thought from Penn State's perspective, okay, if you're the first one, in my eyes, it would have been better for him to drag this out through July and get as far away from those Oregon and Notre Dame visits as possible. So that's why the June 20th thing doesn't look good to me. At the same time, listen, I don't know enough about this. I just know going on history and seeing how many guys do this. I'm just curious, even if he sticks with that June 20th commitment date, because we know, Joey's very good relationship with all 4 of these schools. I assume he absolutely wants to get this process over with. It has been a very hectic couple of months for him, especially when you add in the 7-on-7 and OT7s he's been doing. There's been a lot of traveling, a lot of phone calls. I'm sure it hasn't really been that much fun outside of maybe the visits at times. But just knowing Joey's personality and things, like making that decision a week after the Notre Dame visit, unless he kind of already knows where he wants to go, just seems to not really quite align with how he's handled some other things, as far as really thinking things over and all that. So, time will tell. I think there's a lot of questions still out there as far as can Penn State get him back for a day trip? And then also just, again, does he stick with that date? Because I think it looks and sounds good right now. Hey, let's get this done in 15 days. But those 15 days are going to come really quick. And I just don't know. I don't see him and his family absolutely forcing it if, they're even 98% there, not 100%, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. You actually wrote a little bit about the lay of the land when it comes to defensive skill positions, linebackers, corners, safeties, today, just before the show at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, because these guys are professionals. And Ryan, before the show, was doing some journalism and giving us an insight into what he thinks of the class.
I was making French toast for my children and getting them to school. Today's the last day of school, by the way. They're going to be home in like 3 hours. Like, come on. Oh, here we go. Summer.
So I guess we're not seeing you at the Lash building this afternoon. Is that
not today? No, but I'll be there tomorrow. We got camp tomorrow and camp Sunday. I'll come for 2 of the 3 events.
Oh man, we got to talk about that. I didn't even put that on the rundown. Anyway, here's the promo is go read Ryan's article because we don't have enough time to talk about it today on the show, but it's great stuff. And he outlines the players involved, Joey O'Brien, how he fits in the safety room, which is, I wrote yesterday about they can field a full secondary and breaking out where those players would fit. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is where you go to get that information. Sign up right now for just $1. You get access to the site. You can read some of this information. You get the intel over this official visit weekend, which is so important. And then, of course, you can decide if you want to join us for the rest of the year. So that first dollar goes for a week, and then you have to sign up for the full year. But I promise you, what it's worth, it's less than $1 a day, by the way. And if you're a Penn State football obsessive like the rest of us, like you love football and you're a Penn State football fan, you're here on the show, it's some of the best money you can invest into your hobby possible. And so we want to make sure that you join us, and we want to make sure that we get you all the information you want, because again, we got 60 minutes here a day. For 3 days a week, 3 hours. There's infinitely more we could talk about here on the show. We just don't have the time for it. Of course, what we always have time for is the people that make this show possible, and that includes Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise, who's been a very long-time supporter. And talk about a guy who's a fanatic about recruiting. This guy advertises on the show specifically because he's a college football recruiting nut. He loves this stuff. So if you're here, you probably have a lot in common with Andy. Probably get along, have a good conversation with him. And that's actually the foundation of his business, is trying to find people like him who were in similar situations before he started investing in his franchises. So check out, investing in franchises like him, not his franchises specifically. Andy is a franchise consultant. So he helps you get into a business to manage based on your expertise, your financial situation, and what you're looking for. Are you looking for changing your life radically and going into making money for yourself? Are you looking to diversify your portfolio if you're a fancy person who has a portfolio? Unlike me, who has, I think I have a 401k. Be better than that. Talk to Andy, 404-973-9901, and get on his calendar at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. His services are 100% free. He walks you through the entire process because he's done this multiple times on his own, let alone the dozens and dozens and maybe even hundreds. I don't even know how many times he's done it when consulting with people. I mean, he's been advertising with us for years, so clearly this is working for him. So check it out. And if you've got the business acumen, you've got the money, the finances, and you want to make a change, Andy can help you with that. Now, something that we can all get behind is beer. And that's why you want to go to the Happy Valley Brewfest July 19th. Put it on your calendar. It's the weekend after Arts Fest. So if you can't make it up for Arts Fest and you want to have a really fun weekend where you can actually walk into places in Happy Valley, visit some old haunts, come up for the Happy Valley Brewfest, July 19th, 2025. It's 3 to 8 p.m., and that's with the VIP admission. So you want to get there early. Fitz, I keep throwing it to you on this part because I know, first off, we joke that you're the beer guy, but you're not like just drinking anything. You're the beer aficionado. You understand good beer. So tell us about the Happy Valley Brewfest and what people can see at an event like this.
I do love good beer, and it's hot out, and summer, man. It's beer season, right, Ryan? You know that.
I got
You're a golfer
fried
now,
yesterday.
so yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Fourth spot is really fried right now, guys. Gotta be honest with you.
Oh boy. Well, July 19th, there's going to be beer, and it's going to be in State College, Pennsylvania for the Happy Valley Brewers Fest 2025 in the Porter North lot, which is attached to Medler Field, just outside. Of course, this was in the stadium last year. It's not this year because of reconstruction or the renovation and all that stuff. We got over 75 breweries from Pennsylvania and beyond, exclusive pours and opportunities to meet the brewers, live music, food vendors, a great atmosphere for big groups. Somebody was in the chat a couple weeks ago that said they went to one of the brew fests, or I guess it was on the board that said they went to the brew fest with me in like 2010. And that was before I had kids, so I have no memory of that whatsoever. It's just a wonderful time. It's just wonderful, happy people. When a bunch of people get together and appreciate the beer, there are few better scenes in my eyes. You can get the VIP or general admission. I think the VIP is a good deal, an extra hour at the beginning. As I said before, if you want the special stuff, the good pours, they're usually gone by the time everybody else gets in there. There's also designated driver tickets available for purchase. Those are very important as well.
Yeah.
Perfect reason to visit State College this summer if you're in town. I would call it an off weekend because it's not Arts Fest, it's not a football weekend, so. Yeah. You can get in town, you can find a hotel, and you can just spend the weekend in a great place, reconnect with old friends, visit old spots, all that stuff. You can see downtown, which looks remarkably different from whenever you went to Penn State. It's just changing so fast that even if you graduated 2 years ago, it looks very different. But check out happyvalleybrewersfest.com. Our friends at Anti-Fragile will be there as well. Just got a note from one of our longtime subscribers. He went down, he had a cheesesteak and he had a beer, and he was very impressed. So I would expect more of that at the Happy Valley Brewers Fest because Pennsylvania, underrated beer state, actually probably pretty well-rated beer state, but still an underrated beer state. And over 75 breweries are coming to Happy Valley. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, it's a Penn State love fest. So if you love Penn State, you love State College, you love Happy Valley, we love it here. That's why we live here. It's why I stayed here after graduating. So come check it out, say hi, have some fun. It's a great place to visit. It's a great place to visit if you're a recruit as well. So it is time to talk about this official visit weekend. I've hyped this up for maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month, because this is, to me, when I look at the names and the way that these two guys have talked about these names, it feels like the best opportunity to get game-changing football players from a profile perspective, from a talent perspective, watching the highlights. A lot of these guys are the ones, when I watch it, I sit up in my chair. So, like, editorial aside, these are also guys they have relationships with, from what I understand. So let's just talk about those players. And for if you're new here on the YouTube channel, catching us for the first time live, because we're going at 9 instead of 10, maybe it's your first time hearing about Carter Meadows or Tyson Harley. So, Ryan, kick us off. Tell us about the this weekend in a little more detail from what we've talked about already. Dealer's choice of where you want to start, of player of importance that you think is most notable this weekend.
Yeah, right now, like I said, to start off the show, I think there are, right now I got 15 guys that I believe are all showing up. I have to confirm 1 or 2 of them still, but the thing to know is 12 of them are 4-star prospects. And, I think 8 of them are top 300 kind of players. So this is an absolutely stacked list. I mean, we'll see what shows up, or, how things play out for the next weekend and maybe that final one, June 20th through 22nd. But this, to me, is the most stacked weekend, official visit wise, at the moment, for sure. Like I said at the top of the show, defensive line recruiting is probably the number one priority now. Sean, I think you would agree with 2D tackles and a lot of really good defensive ends still available that they need to add. This is the weekend that could very well determine how that plays out. You're starting with Carter Meadows and Luke Wafel, right? Luke Wafel isn't a 5-star at the moment, but he's ranked, I think, 17th in the country, 14th maybe it is, by On 3. Obviously, as long as he stays in the top 32 nationally, you're talking about a 5-star player. Carter Meadows, of course, edge rusher out of Gonzaga in DC, 6'6", 225-ish. He's already a 5-star. So you're talking about 2 Penn State's absolute primary edge rusher targets in the region, guys who have been here regularly, guys who fit Penn State really well. And here you go. This is your chance to make that big impression on both. Wafel just went to Ohio State last weekend. A lot of good talk about what the Buckeyes were able to do. I think Steve mentioned the other day that he thinks the Buckeyes are in the lead. I kind of left my talks with his dad in May thinking Texas would be the school, but it doesn't surprise me that after his first official visit, that Texas would be the school surging there. So this is Penn State's opportunity to change that. Obviously, his brother Owen is now part of the team. Owen's couple months here so far have gone really well. I think his family has really appreciated Deion Barnes for a long time now. And now that, their oldest son is working with him, I feel like that appreciation and respect has only grown. So that's obviously very positive for Penn State. The thing I have been trying to stress for a long time here is just which one of these schools is going to throw more money at them than the others, because I feel like, and this is the same with Carter Meadows as well, when you're talking about those 5-star guys, schools tend to get aggressive, and those are where the bidding wars start. I don't think that his family is, looking for money. I don't think that that's their ultimate goal here, which is probably a good thing for Penn State when Texas, Ohio State is involved. It's Oregon, the other one, or USC, excuse me. So
can I just kind of clarify?
Yeah.
So it feels like, because all these schools are very good schools, right? So all things being equal, why wouldn't you take then the highest bidder unless there was an overwhelming reason to go to one of the other schools from a personal standpoint? So I guess, is that what you're kind of framing this as?
Proximity to home, comfort too. I mean, I don't want to just make that out to be the case, because USC is on the other side of the country.
Yeah, you still got to go there. You still got to live there. Like, that's
right.
Yeah. And
his brother's here too. So there are some things there. And again, I don't think none of my talks with their family has been like, man, this is a great opportunity for a payday. But again, I also just know that, when you go from, he's a 3-star and then he was boom, and instantly jumped into 5-star range, like just the pursuit and the opportunities there financially have just skyrocketed for Luke. And I don't know that too many teams have maybe discussed money with him yet. Maybe Ohio State probably has, I guess, after coming off an OV, but that's going to all come late. And I think that that's going to make the last couple of weeks of not just his recruitment, but a lot of these guys kind of hard to predict at times, because there is a lot of top talent here, a lot of aggressive schools. And we know now with this salary cap situation that the money is supposed to be there. Let me clarify. We still are waiting for that all to become official after these court cases, but it's expected to be there. And, it's going to make these schools incredibly aggressive. So you have to like where Penn State stands as far as family vibe, and Owen's enjoying his time, and Barnes has been recruiting Luke as hard as anyone for, at least over a year now, probably more like a year and a half too. I think that all bodes well for Penn State, but I'm just cautiously optimistic, because I do feel, again, not just for Luke, but for so many of these guys, that the end of these recruitments are going to be a lot about outbidding each other, right, and then weighing the pros and cons of this offer to that offer.
So for those that are listening on the podcast that can't see the highlights, I'll just read out you some of the stats here. Nearly 6'6", 245 pounds is what he's listed at on his On3 profile. Anywhere from 14th to 109th in the industry rankings, in between the gulf between 14th overall for On3 and 109th by 247. Just personally watching his highlights, I think he's much closer to 14 than 109. So Luke Wafel, incredibly talented football player and a high priority for Penn State, along with Carter Meadows. Fitz, I want to go to let's just finish up then the defensive end board, because this is a deep board that's here all in person, it feels like, this weekend, with guys like Ashton Blatt, Jackson Ford, and others. So take us through the
Tyson Harley.
Tyson Harley
very
is
important.
the one I wanted to ask you about. Thank you. That was the name that I was like searching.
No,
I was searching. I had his profile up ready to go, and then we were talking about Wafel, so I was like, well, we got to get this up. So Fitz, tell us about Tyson Harley, a guy that was added recently, or at least announced recently that he was visiting this weekend as well.
Yeah, 5 defensive ends on the docket this weekend. Meadows and Wafel, obviously the big ones. But yeah, the 3 to me are very fascinating. There's Keeson Elizer no longer visiting, but Jackson Ford, the in-state guy, saw him at Under Armour a couple weeks ago. Tyson Harley, really talented guy. You look at what Gonzaga does on defense, and Carter Meadows is obviously the 5-star there by On3, but Tyson Harley, the more productive player, really good player, good size, 6'3.5". He's got good length as well. So this is a guy that I think is just one of those good football players. You can throw him and Ashton Blatt in that same category. I think Harley a little bit more athletic than Blatt, but all of them seem like they could play defensive end at Penn State. So I think it's going to just be fascinating to see how this plays out. Obviously, you got a couple of guys on the top tier, and then you've got guys that could play here, and that's just a product of being so good in the region. So I'm fascinated, basically, Ford and Blatt as the two Pennsylvania guys. James Franklin usually does not say no to Pennsylvania guys, so I think those guys definitely make a lot of sense. You're going to take Meadows and Wafel no matter when they want to come, whether that's now, whether it's December, whatever what may be. And Harley is I think kind of in the middle of that. So all guys that they would take at this point. And it's going to be fascinating to see how Dion Barnes works with this, because it's not just ends coming this weekend. There's a few tackles coming in as well. So he's going to be tired. That defensive line group is going to be tired by then. And people ask, why do they do this? To get all these guys on campus at the same time. And it's I think it's encouraging to be around sort of like-minded folks. And 5 defensive ends, 3 defensive tackles. Yes, it's going to eat into meeting time, and you may not spend as much one-on-one time with Barnes or something like that as possible, but you kind of get this group feel for things. And that's going to be really important moving forward. It's probably an underrated aspect of recruiting for a lot of these guys, because they're going to spend so much time in that room with these other guys. And you want to feel, you want to sort of capture if you have the feel of a guy that can play at Penn State's defensive end room. And there's been guys that have come in and they've seen it and they've been like, I'm a little bit over my head here. We've seen that in the past couple of cycles. So fascinated to see how this one plays out. I don't know. Someone asked me, why haven't I put in a pick for Jackson Ford? And it's just like, I don't know how this is going to play out. I mean, they're going to get guys, no doubt about it. But which guys come in, and is the pecking order enough? We get so caught up in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this that they're going to take any of those guys, and 3 of those guys, I would say. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that works out. And Daniel Jennings reclassifying opens up a spot and kind of makes everything look a little bit clearer for these 2026 guys.
Ron, I don't want to ask you to answer for the program, but it just.
But I'm going to ask you to answer for the program.
No. I want to be clear that, like, I'm not asking you like what's the strategy, but it comes to my mind, and this is why, like, this is. I'll just say it. Like, if I'm in this situation, it feels like I have to choose. So, like, I may have to choose to go all out for Carter Meadows or Luke Wafel. I may have to choose between Damari Simeon or Titan Davis in the NIL conversation. Kari Adams, Joey O'Brien. Like, you might have to make choices of who you push hardest for when it comes down the stretch. So I guess, like, is that how you feel about that? Is that on the right path of considering all these things? Because in the chat, a couple people are saying, Kyle K said, I'd love to get 2 of these D linemen. Can you? Like, how does that work, knowing that the money is going to be a factor from what you said earlier about somebody's going to throw a bag at somebody as this gets tighter?
I think that's a big reason why you've seen a lot of the commitments that you've seen recently. And I'm not trying to, it sounds like I'm downplaying Ben Azuka or even like a Daryl Carey, some of these other guys, Rosie Labintis. But they know that they sat in really good positions with those guys, and those are guys who checked 7 of the 10 boxes. And they know that there are some stud players still out here, guys who check 9 of the 10. There's a reason they're 5 stars. They know, hey, we got to get these guys on board now because we are going to need a lot of money to throw at some of these guys. So what that money is, especially in a year where you brought a lot of guys back, obviously we know Penn State favors and tends to pay out their current roster much more than recruits. That will have an impact to some degree, because you look at USC right now, it looks like they're certainly favoring the other way, trying to stack a big recruiting class. So it's hard to know exactly how much money they have and all those things and the plan there. I do think it will probably be hard. Like, to me, a realistic class would, or DN, for example, would probably be a Carter Meadows or a Luke Wafel, a Jackson Ford or Tyson Harley, and then you add in like a guy like Ashton Blatt or somebody a little bit like that would make sense from what we've seen from Penn State in the past, over them getting, all 3 of those top, potential 100 type of players. And look, let's make it clear too, like, the competition for all those guys is stacked. So they're not going to get all of them. They know that's not the case, but they know they need enough in reserves to, if you're right there with somebody and you got to go nudge up a little bit more, you can do that. So I think that's the main goal there, to get at least 1 or 2 of those. To me, it's always been kind of, again, we're tiering system. We're doing 1, 2, 3, which I know we shouldn't do. But to me, it's always been certainly Wafel Meadows is like 1A and 1B, and Jackson Ford and Tyson Harley is kind of 2A, 2B in my eyes, as far as like, if you're going to stack tiers, those are kind of the way you go about it. I'm talking more like finances, Sean, like as far as who's going to demand what. That's kind of how I look at that. I don't think Jackson Floyd is going to demand what Carter Meadows is. I don't think Tyson Harley is going to demand what Carter Meadows is. So that's kind of how I would think financially how that kind of plays out.
Fitz, you can respond to that, or we can get on to the defensive tackles, which I think is a big part of this conversation as well. Damari Simeon, I know you mentioned he wanted to get out and see some other schools this spring. Now he's back for an official visit. This feels like, of all of these schools or all these players here, feels like this one's really important. Or it might be just he's my favorite player visiting this weekend from a film perspective. So start us off on the defensive tackle conversation, if you would.
Yeah, T. Frank, it's okay to feel good that the person that you saw first, like you want him to be in the class so you can, silently go back and toot your own horn there. No, but Damari Simeon's been on the board for a long time. But you got to remember, Penn State's got Alex Haskell and Isaac Chikora in there. We almost do this sometimes where we just kind of forget about the committed guys, and it's like, right. Bring on all the defensive tackles, especially at this position where people would like to take 6 defensive tackles a year, and because there's never enough, But I think that Damari Simeon, clearly one of Penn State's top targets for the duration of the cycle. Also on that limited list of guys that attended the SMU playoff game. Like that, again, that is a thing. Like I think that only one has gone elsewhere so far.
Hayden Gephardt, and that's because their defensive end went elsewhere. Yeah.
Defense coordinator, yeah. So
sorry,
you look at what's going on with that group, and it's pretty fascinating how it's played out, because even some guys in there that we kind of wrote off and didn't even think about. Julian Peterson was there. Peyton Falzone we thought was gone, and then all of a sudden he comes back. So you see the true interest level there, and it's as we talk more and more about money, it's not. We can also pull back that reminder that it's not all about money for some guys. So Damari Simeon's coming in, Keyshawn Stansel's coming in, Garrett Witherington from down south coming in. So, I mean, even with 2 in the boat, they are pressing pretty hard to continue to expand that room. And as I've said, those guys are hard to find. Those guys that are big and can move like that. I mean, Stansel's 6'3", Simeon 6'2", 6'3". Garrett Witherington, I think 6'4", 6'5". So big guys that can certainly move. And they're all kind of in that same mold that they came to camp or a lot of them came to camp last year, and they're edge-ish guys, like too big for edge. They're going to go into these things, but they have this skill set. They have the athleticism of guys that have played on the edge. So encouraging group of prospects there. And like I said, they're going to be exhausted after this weekend, because that is how things have worked out. Also, Titan Davis, the highly regarded kid from Missouri, he's no longer coming. I expect him to commit to Alabama at some point here soon.
Well, that certainly is a deep list of defensive tackles that we've seen, as deep, I think, we've seen in terms of talent and the breadth of different types of players on this particular roster. And as we mentioned, a really good base to start with, because I know Isaac Chikora probably does not have the same level of recruiting awareness as a guy like Damari Simeon. But when we're looking at what are the important metrics for a defensive tackle, especially for Penn State, he checks all of the boxes. Like, he checks a lot of the boxes from that perspective. So, same thing with Alex Haskell. Getting 1 or 2 more of these guys feels like an opportunity for a really strong class at a position where Penn State has produced but hasn't been able. This is kind of the conversation of, you got a lot of these guys that are here in the region and also have that recruiting profile, the strike while the iron is hot sort of situation. Offensive line, Ryan, you wrote about J.P. Shabazz this week.
Yep.
I'm interested what you have to say about that. Of course, go read the full article at bluewhiteillustrated.com. A lot of important tackles, I think, coming this weekend, talking about a really strong class for Penn State, what they could do with some success this weekend. So I guess let's take us down the road with the offensive linemen, continuing in this theme of, man, trenches are really important this weekend, it seems.
Yeah. Grayson McHugh, obviously from LaSalle, is undoubtedly the guy this weekend. He's been incredibly high on Troutwine's board for a long time now. And of course, his recruitment has blown up, added a Texas official visit, Notre Dame as well. So to me, McHugh is I would expect Troutwine to spend a lot of time with him this weekend. I think Notre Dame's in a better spot than Penn State would probably prefer with McHugh. But and then that Texas official visit was kind of a wild card one. Didn't really see that coming, especially when Alabama and Ohio State offered late, and he didn't really show a lot of interest to them. And you would think, okay, well, here's Texas now. it'll probably be similar. And then boom, all of a sudden they get an official visit. So that's when I really kind of want to learn more about. I texted with Grayson a little bit about it, but I was kind of waiting until after this weekend to really dig down on, what the interest is in Texas. And we'll be able to do that Sunday after his visit, hopefully. But to me, yeah, McHugh is the guy that I think Troutwine is planning to push the chips on a good bit there at tackle. But with that said, there are 2 more tackles coming to campus this weekend, and JB Shabazz, he's from East Forsyth down in North Carolina. If you recognize the school, that's Danny O'Brien's old high school. I think those ties have played a big part in this. And especially it's I was asking about Danny and all those things, but it's really, his coach, Todd Willard, like it's more so the relationship he has with Franklin because of recruiting Danny O'Brien, because they've been known each other for so long. I think that played a big part in Penn State offering in January. This was a kid who, according to his coach, has really kind of changed a lot in the last 8 months as far as how he's handled the recruiting process, but also just kind of how he carries himself, how he's grown physically. I think Penn State offered in January to kind of see where things go. Kid takes a bunch of visits elsewhere and kind of just starts checking all schools he doesn't like. Now, he hasn't been to Penn State, but from a relationship perspective, Troutwine has done a pretty good job here late as far as really getting a foot in the door and getting Penn State into his top 5. So it's a player who hasn't visited before. Whenever you kind of see players come up for one and done official visits, it doesn't usually pan out in Penn State's way. It did for Darius Dixon last year. And there's others we can point to, but the percentages say those guys usually goes to schools that they've taken a few unofficial visits to. So time will tell with that. Thomas Wilder is also be on campus this weekend. It's a 6'6", 280-some-pound offensive tackle out of Virginia Beach. Penn State's had some success in the Norfolk, Tide area. I think they like Wilder. I think there's certainly guys ahead of him on the board. He has visited Penn State in the past. I don't know if we have a ton marked on his profile because I don't know specifically off the top of my head when he's visited, but I know he has been here at least once or twice. But kind of another player that Penn State has shown interest in, but I think there's quite a few other tackles I would say maybe a little higher on Trout's board. But again, let me stress the fact that he's still coming for an official visit is important because Trout and not just Trout, but Penn State has knocked off quite a few players over the last couple of weeks of guys that like, hey, we had it set, but now we're kind of good at this position. So the fact that they kept Wilder on for this weekend, like Durant Parks, for example, was a player they're supposed to host. He got knocked off for this weekend. I think it does speak to the fact that you have to take him seriously.
Gotcha. And I think specifically when it comes to this particular class, I know we've gone back and forth on this, and there are players that definitely can play tackle. They don't have the guys that look and move like the guys that they've recruited recently on this run where Phil Troutwine has built one of the most impressive offensive line rooms in the country. Be a good opportunity, as you guys mentioned, with Grayson McHugh, JB Shabazz, Thomas Wilder, I'm not as familiar with, but those guys fit the profile. Like they look like the guys that are, I don't want to say missing from this class, because you do have Kevin Brown and Roseby Lobintis who could be great tackles. Just it's interesting how these things are playing out down the stretch to me and what I'm thinking about and monitoring. That aside, we've got a couple of non-trench players, non-defensive or offensive line players. Fitz, where do you want to go next when it comes to the remaining players on the board? Because I think there's a lot. This group could be as interesting given that there's some top targets, some important players, and a little bit else in the mix. So dealer's choice, where you want to go next.
I don't think I've talked about wide receiver on here for a few weeks, and it's been wonderful. Be honest with you. But Travis Johnson's coming in from Virginia. This guy Penn State's been on for a long time. Went down to South Carolina last week. I think he really enjoyed South Carolina. Michigan has kind of been the prominent school in this one. Virginia Tech in there, Indiana in there as well. But he's going to come back up. Penn State has known this family for a long time. Marcus Higgins has had a relationship. His older brother went to West Virginia, West Virginia legacy down there, but recruited him at the University of Virginia. So they've known Higgins for a long time and have a bunch of respect for him. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. Penn State's got 3 commitments from wide receivers right now. Seems pretty solid the way that they have it right now with especially with Jasir Rogers, LeVar Keys all over the place. Davion Brown was up again last weekend as well. So they're okay. Like I don't think they're panicking for wide receivers right now. I know that their mindset and fans' mindset very different, but when asking for the May big board, who Penn State's in the best shape with at wide receiver, it was Davion Brown, it was Travis Johnson. So Travis Johnson, one of the few targets left on that board. I still think that we could see maybe some later movement, watching senior film, watching coaching changes and things like that. But Travis Johnson is pretty well ascended there. Brian Williams took an official visit a couple weeks ago from Florida, but Travis Johnson has ascended to the top of that list. So we'll see what happens there. I'm curious to see the role in NIL plays in it. And going back to Penn State having 3 wide receiver commits, I mean, how much do you commit for the 4th guy? Like that,
Right.
that is a situation where you've got, obviously Michigan's high on his list. Indiana's been sneaky with NIL this year. So more so in the transfer market, but also the high school market as well. So I'm very curious to see how this one plays out, because I think it's pretty wide open. South Carolina, again, he went down there last weekend. I think that that's a fit in terms of the way that this recruitment has played out in the past. So, but Travis Johnson's still firmly on the board for Penn State.
Tight end is interesting, Ryan. We haven't talked a whole lot about tight end. I know I mentioned this last time you and I talked because they had 3 last cycle, but that doesn't mean they're going to skip talent. So tell us a little bit about Max Sutter and the situation with Penn State's tight end recruiting.
Yeah, I've had him circled as their top guy for a while now, and I still believe that's still the case. Of course, Luke Sorensen has moved up the board quite a bit. Braden Fogel, they just kind of somewhat recently offered, but it has felt as if, Sutter is the guy that, Hal's been on for a long time now. For a while, man, it was a lot of talk about Illinois as the top contender with Sutter. It's interesting. He took that official visit really early. I wonder if Illinois was trying to lock him up. I think his official visit was like April 11th to the 13th, which I believe was Illinois spring game. Of course, he didn't commit. Went to Ole Miss, went to Ohio State. Now it's Penn State. And Alabama is set for, I think, that final weekend. We'll see if he moves things around a little bit. But, Penn State has felt like they were in a good spot with Sutter for a long time, but knowing full well they got to duke it out with some prominent schools. And then you have Illinois, the hometown school that, he's been to quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because especially with Sutter, Penn State really only needs one this year. They like Luke Sorensen a lot. I think a lot of people thought Luke Sorensen would probably go to USC, and then USC pays a bunch of money to Bowman, which is a 5-star tight end prospect. Is it Mark Bowman? I forget his first name.
Mark, yeah.
But yeah, so how that impacts Luke now, very interesting to keep an eye on. So it does kind of, I don't feel like it's Sutter and then everybody else situation. I do feel like if Sorensen came here next week and wanted to get, they probably would make the move on it, because they like those guys a lot. But you got Pierce Peterson, and then Braden Fogel as well. So quite a few guys in the mix there. Sutter has certainly been the guy that Hal has pursued the longest and probably the hardest out of those guys. But the board is a bit more open now than what it looked like maybe 6 months ago.
Gotcha. And that's interesting coming down the stretch here at a position where Penn State's fairly strong.
I'm curious to see how many of these guys, because of how deep the room is. I mean,
yeah,
how does that impact these recruitments, right?
Well, that was my question.
Right?
I didn't want to throw it at you in case it was a wild card, but yeah, you've got such a deep tight end room and top tight ends. I mean, we know last year that was a part of the recruitment for
Olish.
Olish. Thank you,
Andrew Olish.
So, yeah, I imagine that might be a part of it as well. Fitz, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be part of it, right? Like it's just human nature. I mean, you're coming in behind three tight ends in one class. One of them, which was a 5-star and on 3. Like you're gonna look at that and be like, maybe I need some time to breathe between this and that. So I just have a hard time. Like I think, hey, the fact that they're in it for Max Sutter, who's their top guy and who is a top 100 guy, top 150 guy.
Something right on that, yeah.
I think that says a lot about the allure of playing tight end at Penn State. But at some point, you're going to have to look at all the variables, and one of those variables is going to be 3 guys in the class prior to you arriving.
So we got a couple of players left here, and of course, we got more to talk about. But the last couple things here of players visiting linebacker, Ryan. This is another interesting situation. 2 in the class, some national prospects that Penn State's interested in, and then we got a couple linebackers visiting this weekend and next couple weekends. So what's going on at that position?
I'm sorry, I was responding to your text message. What did you say? I'm sorry.
Elijah Littlejohn. I was trying to set you up for that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was responding to the text. So interesting at linebacker. They don't need another linebacker. But they're certainly interested in a few. Elijah Littlejohn has been very, very quiet though since he's was offered and visited Penn State in April. Been able to get him to confirm visits and things like that, but to get him to open up about his recruitment. He's not on that Marky Wahlberg level where he's just like a ghost, but he's been difficult to track down. So just from a source perspective and what I was able to gather, from, more so Penn State's end, very interested in him. I kind of get the vibe. It's like a Rodney Colton kind of recruitment where it's like, hey, look, he's been here one time. There's no reason not to have him back up, learn more about him, see how he fits, all those kind of things. But at the same time, with 2 linebackers committed, is he absolutely somebody that they 100% take when you're already at 18, 19, 20? If you look at, we didn't talk about Amari Parlador yet or Marlon Bright. I mean, it feels like their class is kind of, I think it's above 18, what's out there publicly, put it that way. So they're going to have to start making decisions of, how many guys can we take, especially with all the uncertainty up in the air on, the 105 and all those things. So to me, it's you get them up here. And maybe when you get to the end of the weekend, you can kind of make more decisions about like where exactly he stacks up. I felt pretty confident that Cozy Akpala is a guy that absolutely take. Rodney Colton, who also visited last weekend, I'm kind of feels more of a 50-50. If they had room at the end, they would consider him more. Where Elijah Littlejohn sits in that, I think this weekend's going to help sort that out. So I know he has a Georgia Tech official visit coming up next weekend. He did confirm that. That was one that wasn't out there publicly. Added that to his profile today, and then NC State as well. So, Penn State, as far as prominent programs and all those things, looks really good on the board. I think he just went to Virginia Tech last weekend as well. But again, where does he stack up when you still got to add 3 defensive ends? You want to add at least another D tackle. You want to add a couple other tackles. Cornerbacks are stacked. We'll get into that here in a second. But there's just we're at that point of the year now where those decisions have to be made.
So good transition. Robert Wolfel asked this in the chat earlier, and I wasn't sure who he was talking about, so I saved it for here for this general conversation. He says the player that Terry is targeting at DB, which not 100% helpful, but I think he's talking about Amari Polidor.
The players. There's a bunch of them.
Players. I'm sorry. I read that as a singular, as singular player. My bad. The players that Terry is targeting at defensive back, is that straight up need for outside corner, a shift to what is wanted for the defense, the talent that is readily available, or a combination of those things? That is a much easier question to answer. So sorry, Robert, I read your question incorrectly. Guys, is the board changing for Terry Smith with this new defense, or is it just what's available this cycle and the fit? Fits.
All right. Yeah, no, I think it's more a product of kind of what Ryan was saying earlier. You look at the roster changes, you look at the essentially 105 scholarship / cap, whatever is coming through, and you see a more lax policy on numbers. Like he was told to me on the outset of the cycle, take all the numbers that you think they're going to get and add 1 to each. Now that is not how that's going to work out, but it's also an exercise in expanding what you thought to be possible for this class. So they've got 2 corners right now. We have David Davis listed as a corner, but I think he's a safety. So you got 2 corners right now, 3 safeties, and they will keep going because there is big time talent on the board. I think this is kind of how you see most recruitments playing out. And this is not just for the secondary. You've got a certain amount of guys that Ryan talked about that you can get before official visits start. You build the base of your class, and then you go after the big fish at the end there. So I think that's kind of what you're looking at. You leave yourself open to, or you leave yourself sort of a bank to fall back on when you take these guys early, and then you go after the big guys because you're not going to get all of them. You're like, there's going to be losses this year. Leo Delaney committed to Clemson yesterday. There wasn't not a shocker, but like Delaney, Carter Scruggs is probably going to go to Clemson. I mentioned Titan Davis going to Alabama. Like, they're names that are going to be familiar that go elsewhere. That's just how this always works. Yeah. But you've got an opportunity to get good players on board and then swing for the fences. And I think guys are, I don't want to say more understanding now, but this is more business than ever for these kids. And you think about being the top guy, you think about being the guy that's in your class, and maybe it doesn't bother you as much. I know we just had a thing about tight ends and taking 3 in the class before you, but maybe it doesn't bother you as much being a part of a 4 cornerback class as opposed to having 2 corners in a class or something like that, because this is business and this is competition. And, you know, if you're compensated, there's an expectation there. So I know it's not pay for play, but okay. But no, going back to the original question, which I think was more a schematic question. I mean, you play a 5 defensive back defense right now. Like can just go with fewer linebackers and more defensive backs. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing now. There's been hybrid guys that have been brought in. We talk about Kenny Woosley playing that nickel sort of spot, nickel slash hybrid safety slash king max slash whatever slash you want to put in there. That's what Penn State's doing now. So versatile defensive backs. They still love guys that are like Julian Peterson, that's 6'2" and runs a 4.4 with long arms. Like maybe he's not there on the tape yet, but maybe he can get there. So I think Penn State just taking flyers on guys that have these certain traits, and it makes a lot of sense when you don't take numbers into account, which that was a thing at one point. I don't think it's a thing anymore. You don't really worry about that as much because you've got this buffer, especially in this movement from 85 to 105. That's a buffer that you're going to have an opportunity, a 2-year window here where you can add more guys, and it probably doesn't catch up to you as much.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think the emphasis of adding more defensive backs is definitely a real thing. And if you can find guys that are 6'2" and are fast, but maybe they don't have corner skills, and suddenly they're an elite safety, that's a great place to be. And Darius Dixon, I think, is a great example of a guy who's going to play on the outside this year, but I still think has great slot potential. And however you phrase that, and this, by the way, this is something I desperately want to ask Jim Knowles about. What do you think your nickel is? Is it a safety? Is it a corner? Does it matter to you? Like, in terms of how you view the position, regardless of who plays it, it's a defensive back, so you need to get more of those guys, as Fitz pointed out. So,
did we just get a spoiler for your line of questioning for Jim Knowles today?
I don't know if I'm going to get to ask it. Like, that's the problem. Is maybe I'll get a chance to ask it, maybe I won't. So I'm just putting it out in the universe. So maybe somebody else will ask it.
So I'm going to add one thing real quick. I mean, Robert, just Mari Polidor is coming this weekend. Have we got into that yet? As far as Sean put an RPM in for him the other day. I think it's out there on everywhere now, so I think we can just kind of discuss it. But Polidor, you add him right now. If they get him, I think they probably will. In my opinion, you look at what's left. You got Kari Adams, big fish. Dorian Barney, big fish. Brandon Arrington, the biggest of the fish, the marlin of the group, if you want to be honest. And then here's the guy that I think we've kind of overlooked for a while, but is absolutely in that mix, and that's CJ Brunel, who's committed to Nebraska, ran a 10-2, consistently ran 10 threes all year, super athletic. What do they all have in common? They're not necessarily for one position or the other. They're just really good athletes. And I think that right now, you get Amari Polidor on board, you have the taller two guys, already committed. And then you just go for the best absolute players that you can add out of those four. I think that's kind of the goal. Dorian Barney's the one who's been kind of mentioned, leaning towards Penn State's way, all those things. We'll see how it plays out. But, I have those four guys I just mentioned. They're all really good athletes that I think Penn State will take no matter what.
And Polidor at St. Francis now. Like, he's not he hasn't been there for long. He transferred there in February.
Has he started classes there yet, though, Sean? I don't know that he has. I think he's actually doing online classes from what I understand, and will join them in the summer.
Okay. Good to know. I
don't think he's actually part of that program yet.
So yeah.
I meant to probably should have told you that yesterday before you wrote that up, but
before I said it on live TV.
We do a lot of things over here that we should.
We do.
Especially, but we're supposed to be starting the show in 4 minutes, so we're good. It's early
exactly.
In the day.
Nobody's here yet. You look at the St. Francis dynamic, and does that matter in this recruitment? I think it does. Like, I think that, Penn State's not trying to have a pipeline to St. Francis. No school really does. Like, I think if you could pick out one school, maybe Auburn, and I think there's connections as to why that is. But like, it's an interesting sort of dynamic with St. Francis, because there's no reservation there with them sending a kid to Penn State. It just hasn't worked out. And the last time that Penn State was really serious was the Andre Roy stuff, when all that stuff fell apart thanks to Mike Loxley at the end. So like that's kind of what you're looking at with St. Francis and, inner city Baltimore versus Central Pennsylvania, as we have a chat in the middle here about how hard it is to get to State College once again. It's just very different dynamics, and a lot of the kids that go there are not looking for what State College provides, and that's fine. Like, you find something that makes sense for you, no matter what your background is.
So just to clarify, as of April 5th, this was my last communication with him about this. He was taking online classes, so he wasn't at Mount Zion or St. Francis. So I think he was doing online classes, then will join St. Francis. I assume he's probably been working out with their program or maybe something like that, but he's not technically at the school yet, which, I mean, good or bad, whatever you want to look at it. Like basically the way it's been kind of told to me is like he's not really a St. Francis kid at the moment. He's going to play there this upcoming year. But when we look at just compare it to last, handful of guys that they've dabbled with and haven't got, like it's a little bit of a different situation, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. So we got a couple minutes here left on the show. And speaking of Baltimore, Ryan, you were at the Under Armour camp. So what are your big takeaways from there? We're not going to be able to get into maybe as much detail as I thought originally on the show. It was a very important weekend. We went over all these players in detail, but 26, 27, 28 were all represented at the Under Armour camp. What was there? Because it was not in State College.
Yeah, Kari Adams and Jazeel Hart were really the only 2026 guys to mention. They were both fine on one-on-ones. It's John, how many times have we gone to these Under Armour camps and they put these guys in brand new cleats and everybody just slips all over the place, especially when you're a defensive back and you're not broken in cleats and things like that. So we saw that.
Matthew Gregory seemed to do okay. I saw those numbers that he posted.
He's not a defensive back. He's a wide receiver. He's running this way.
In terms of running, he's very fast.
Yeah. So, so there's a bunch of slips by everybody. And that's why I try not to put too much stock into the one-on-ones and things. I thought Jazeel Hart was fine when he wasn't falling out of his shoes at times. And same with Kari Adams. I mean, there's plenty on there. Just as far as, but the main takeaway from the camp really is just the younger guys, the 2027, the 2028s. That's what happens when you host a camp the first weekend of official visits, and all the prominent guys in the region, 2026 wise, are taking official visits. Sean mentioned Matthew Gregory there, put up some crazy numbers. There's a reason he's a top 100 prospect for on three. Ran a 4.35 40. Guys, that's laser time. 4.35.
Oh my word!
If he comes to Penn State and runs that, I mean,
that's in the 4.2.
Yeah,
I mean, Under Armour's laser really humbles a lot of kids because it is always a slow track if they say that, but it's actually more accurate than most. Right. He can fly. 10.52 in the state runner up, I believe, in the PIAA. So that 4.35 is a heck of an acceleration too. Like 10.52 is very fast.
It was a 1.56.10. So I mean, dude, he's at max speed
pretty quick.
Pretty long after that. 12 yards in. So
Penn State should get him. They should do that.
They should do the thing where they add him to the class.
Yeah.
Route running was pretty good too. He was certainly one of the better guys there. I have to mention Miles McAfee too. Miles just absolutely crushes it in these settings.
He's phenomenal as a football player. I'm excited to watch him grow up as a football player wherever he goes. I think he's
Archbishop Spalding player. We'll see. I don't know how. If he's a Penn State guy to me, he probably would have visited a little bit more than he has over the last year or so. We'll see. Time will tell with that. But there's a couple other guys. I want to mention Keith Miller's a young up-and-coming 2028 at Archbishop Spalding, who I think looks like a really good athlete. There's Ryan Drakeford, another 2028, who is going to McDonough this year. And I think that, obviously those McDonough guys we always have circled, he's going to be a guy we got to seriously be talking about probably here in the next year or so. Penn State's already offered really good size and length. I mean, for a rising sophomore, I thought he handled himself really well in those kind of settings. So impressed with both of those guys. Defensive line wise, I always like James Pace just because he picks up his phone for me, which I appreciate. But boy, oh boy, James Pace is going to be a stud of a player. Was really impressed with him as an edge rusher. Already looks, in my opinion, physically like some of these guys who are a year older, right? Like we saw Zion Ellie last year, and that was kind of, I don't want to say his coming out party. He was already highly thought of, but that really exploded his recruitment. I don't know James Pace's testing numbers. I will say Under Armour is getting very, very tight with testing numbers and handing out information. Seems like everybody's doing that these days, Fitz. But
how about it?
Yeah, it's getting at the end of the day, testing numbers are money. So I get it. I understand.
Are we saying that speed is expensive?
No.
Yes, to some degree. But my point is, like, it's more difficult now to track down some of that information than anybody. But so I don't know exactly how he tested, but as far as holding up really well in different drills, being able to move athletically, laterally, all those little things, like James Pace looks like he's going to be, in my opinion, without a doubt, one of the top defensive ends in the area. I don't know about a 5-star or anything like that, but he makes sense in my eyes, to be like a top 100 kind of player here moving forward. Anthony Sweeney also tested really well. He's another defensive end at a good counsel that Penn State has apparently offered, Sean. I didn't know that when I put that on the board. I'd had a brain fart and put it on the board that Penn State has an offer this kid. And they did like months ago. But, ran a 4.7. Again, laser time. We're talking about a 6'4", 230-pound player. Pretty good. Good shuttle as well. A broad, just under 9 foot for, a rising junior. So that's pretty good as well. So, again, it was really about young guys getting to know some of these players, seeing how they perform. Brandon Lockley was there, by the way, too, linebacker prospect out of St. Joseph's Prep. He's really, it's funny because he came and camped as like a safety the year before, and now seeing him camp as a linebacker, just the weight he's put on and stuff, you can tell, he's committed in the weight room and all those things. So a lot of good young guys. Go ahead, DJ.
Yeah, wrap up. That's all.
I'm done.
Sorry. Here's the deal. We're at the end of the show, but I really liked this graphic that I made, so I wanted to play it, and which means we have to have at least 65 seconds of talking about the official visit weekend, the recap from this past weekend with the committed players and some of those uncommitted players. Ryan wrote about which ones he thinks are most likely to commit over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. But Fitz, can you give us a general recap of what people could find at bluewhiteillustrated.com, or some of the information you guys have about some of the feedback from having the committed players there this past weekend?
Yeah, the committed players had great visits, if you can believe it. No, it's a good opportunity for Penn State to get those guys together, and as we said, sort of talk more about their future, their actual future, talk more about their numbers and things like that. This is something where we've tried to get it across to people that the first half of the cycle is not going to be the money part of the cycle. You're not going to, you're going to find a lot of kids that you can get into your class without talking hard numbers. You can give a ballpark, but you're not going to talk hard numbers. And now as we get into the second half of the cycle, which is, 6 months until National Signing Day this week, you've got an opportunity to zero in on the details. And that's going to work out for some guys. It might not work out as well for some of the others that maybe thought that they would get more. And that hasn't happened yet in terms of guys breaking off or anything like that. I think you're going to see it nationally a little bit, but that's, I think Penn State's been pretty upfront with how they handle the situation and give them a general idea what to expect. I mean, you're not walking in like expecting to make $1 million and then it's like, no, you're going to get 10% of that or whatever. It's not that's not really how Penn State operates. So as you get into it with the Joey O'Briens, with the Kari Adams, with the defensive ends that are coming in this weekend, those numbers are going to, number one, become a little bit more clear for the player, not necessarily publicly, but for the player. And also like figure out if you're truly in it for these guys. So it's going to be fascinating to see how all that develops. And by the way, those numbers are going to be higher for these guys than most of the class that's in the boat right now.
Well, we're going to follow all that along at bluewhiteillustrated.com over the next couple of weeks. And of course, when the next commitment breaks, we'll have that for you here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Great reminder to subscribe if you haven't already. We're here at the end of the show. You know that these guys killed it. So like the video. Please help us out that way. If you're still here, because there's still a bunch of you that are paying attention. You're in the chat. You're watching the video. I know we're wrapping up. You're about to click off the screen. Don't do it right away. Click like, subscribe if you haven't, then hit the exit. And of course, James Franklin's press conference coming up this afternoon. So make sure around 12:30 is when I'm ballparking. I'm hoping I have it up around there so you can check out what James Franklin had to say in detail for his June recap with the media. All that here from Blue White Illustrated. We're here to give you as much Penn State football conversation as we possibly can and as much as you can handle. So we'll be back next week. Talk to you then.